It is Tuesday, June 6, 2023. It is 1:30 PM, and you are at a Wausau Waterworks Commission meeting. Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much. I will note that we have one excused absence in Commissioner Jean, but everyone else is present. Thank you very much for joining us. The first item on our agenda is to approve the minutes of the May 1st, 2023 meeting. I would entertain a motion. I have a motion by Alder Herbst and a second by Commissioner Force. Any discussion? I'm not seeing any, so all of those in favor of approving the minutes from the May 1st, 2023 meeting can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. We are now on to item 2, Director's Report on Utility Operations, and I will pass it over to Mr. Lindman.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. There's definitely quite a few items, trying to keep the commission up to date on what is happening. With regards to the staffing needs assessment, we had brought previously to the commission to work with MEUW to get a training program established with them. There was some issues with the contract through legal, and they were unable to be resolved, so we're back to square one. CIVMIC was contacted from HR, and they do have the ability to assist us. So we will be working through CIVMIC, hopefully, to get a program established. One of the nice things was we did get an assessment done through MEUW, which they provided to us for water, wastewater, and the streets division as well. And so that would be a basis for us to start. So we do have some compiled information to work with CIVMIC on. Yeah.
Sorry, I thought I saw a hand. I'm good.
You want us to wait till the end?
No, as we go through, because I can go through, there's a lot of information here, so I'm happy to.
Can you turn your mic on? Thank you.
CIVMIC stands for what?
Cities, Village, it's our insurance company for the
Okay.
city. Yeah, sorry. Update on lead service line replacement, the pilot plan. So we are out to bid now on the city side. We've done outreach. We've partnered with Clark Dietz to do that. Our staff went with them as well. Yep.
So I thought that at the meeting, we had talked about trying to notify the local elected officials in advance of those meetings, and I know that both Alder Dingy and I were not notified. It would be helpful in the future because people tend to come to us with questions.
Sure.
If you would notify the local elected officials when those meetings are being held so that we can deal with the constituent questions.
Can do.
Mr. Force.
Yeah, on the LSL outreach update as of end of May, that chart, these numbers look ironically familiar to the numbers we had before on lead service lines regarding acceptance by homeowners. I mean, waiting for opt-in, you have as many on 10th Street as who've opted in, so, and you have more in the other on Grant and Henrietta, so we're at less than 50%. What does that mean? Does that mean that these homes are not going to participate in the LSL project, or these properties? They might not be homes, they might be apartment buildings, I'm not sure. But are we happy with that number? Are we working to bring the number of opt-ins up? And if so, how do we do that? Or are we right back where we were before, where we couldn't get enough, we couldn't get, in my estimation, enough people to participate?
Yeah, so on the chart, the total number of houses on the project or dwellings were 99.
Yes.
9 of the homes that we found did not need work, so we're working with 90 properties,
Right.
okay? When you look, the ones that have opted in have actually signed the right of entry form. The ones that we're waiting on to opt in are 40 of them. So the ones that were not done are 20 on the far right so far, that we do not have confirmation whether they want to participate or not.
So the waiting for opt-in means they've agreed to participate, they just haven't signed the paperwork?
That's correct, yeah. So whether that's a scheduling
Right.
or, they need to come in and do that, yeah.
So you're batting 69 out of 90,
That's correct.
which is better than before.
Yeah, it's much better than before, and to answer your follow-up question, Jim, is yes, we are continuing to reach out, and we will have another door hangers. We do know that there's some people that work, into the evening in the summer, because they do landscaping and stuff, so they work during daylight hours and typically long days, so they have shown interest. We just have to work with them to get the paperwork and other things signed. So I do think that number of 20 will go down, but we will continue to move through that. We're also compiling information as we work through this. There's been a lot of interest in having the sanitary sewer replaced and what that means. So we've been working through some of that communication. So that will be added to our communication moving forward in the future. Some more details on that, because that's going to be solely on the homeowner to do that portion of the work.
And they've asked to have the sewer line replaced?
They don't have to. That is their choice, yeah.
But they have, the ones you're talking about have asked to have it replaced?
Many of them, yeah,
Many,
are
okay.
interested, yep. And we do in our contract that we're out for bid right now is requiring the plumber to video that sanitary line before and after their work is done. Unless that line is going to be replaced, then there's no reason to do it, so.
Do we know how many of these 69 lines that it looks like we're going to be replacing in these 3 neighborhoods are going to be trenchless as opposed to open pit?
We don't. We're
Okay.
actually leaving that up to the contractor with their conversations with the homeowner.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, well, that's encouraging.
Next on the director's report, I guess there's a laundry list here from the Regulatory Affairs Seminar that I attended. I was part of a panel of 3 other communities that answered questions of the group, kind of gave our story with, as it relates to PFAS and the impact that Wausau has had, but before that, there was a full day of different information from different entities, agencies, from federal, state, government. So I thought there was a lot of good information that came out, what we can predict and kind of look at what's coming down the road, as well as, what is happening right now in the works, so.
If I could,
Yes.
one of the issues that you talked about, I think in this section, was the regulatory compliance requirements. Was it in this one?
Probably is.
And how are we proposing to address the monitoring and tracking of grant administration expenses and other things? Are we able to factor that in? Where is the capacity, and how are we going to ensure regulatory compliance or grant compliance?
Yeah, for grants, yeah.
Yeah.
We work heavily with finance to make sure that, all the different grants that we potentially apply for, that we're meeting the requirements, whether that's through the bidding, whether the application process, whether, whatever that is. And most of this money's coming through the state, so the state is providing us the documentation. Now, one of the challenges that we have as staff is that because the funding doesn't come directly to us, it's a painstaking process to apply. So DNR is one of them, right? Full applications, plans, everything. And so the city council had approved an amount of carryover funds for us to hire consultants to help us out with the application process to ensure that, they're timely, that all the information is there. And so depending on what projects they are and which consultants that we were working with, we have contracts with them established on kind of a time and materials basis, so to help us out apply for those. Yep. Does that answer?
Yes.
Okay. I guess I should add to that too, that, with the reimbursement resolutions that you'll see today too, those costs may be reimbursed if that project is approved through the state. So those may be costs that we get back. I guess there was a update request as far as the solar project. So there have been 2 solar task force meetings. Our next one is on June 21st, where the task force had asked for some additional information, which we'll be working with compiling for that meeting and a meeting packet for them. I know Chad is, Henke is chairing that. He's been great to work with, and he is, I think, really focusing that committee on getting goals set, so that project can move forward to public outreach, which I'm hoping will begin here yet this summer.
Mr. Force.
Who's on that task force, Eric?
I don't know the citizen members, Mayor.
Yeah, we have someone from the neighborhood. We have Alder Henke who's chairing. We have Commissioner Robinson. We have somebody who, Susan, I can't remember, she has an interest in this or maybe worked in this field. So,
And Jay Caldwell?
yes, and Jay, who's on one of our committees as well. I think the Sustainability Committee.
So the neighborhood has 1 representative?
Yep.
We don't know who that is.
Paul Svetlik?
Oh, Paul, okay.
Yep.
He was the only person from the neighborhood that applied.
Okay.
He's good, he's good.
There's some information from Water and Wastewater Division on some staffing updates, projects. One of the items that has come up since Workday has been in place is how staff is being paid overtime. And, in the past, it has come up too in streets and other divisions within the department. And I wanted to keep you up to date that has come up. But I'll be working with HR on that. And if any changes are needed, they'll be come through HR and the HR committee working with James on that. I don't know if any of the commissioners have any other.
Mr. Force.
Eric, I don't know if you're going to get to this update on PFAS results next. Is that coming up? But my observation was, I think 2 meetings ago, we okayed increased testing, an increased rate of testing.
Yep.
And unless I'm missing something, I haven't heard anything about that, whether
We okayed testing starting in June. So.
starting in June, so
Monthly.
you're just into it. But we are doing it?
We are doing it. We just received our bottle,
Okay,
I believe yesterday. So
all right, thanks for the
we'll-
explanation.
Mayor,
Alder Herbst.
I'll direct this to Eric. Regarding the,
Is your mic on?
yeah, it is. I guess I should go over to him.
I think this one.
Hey, up in
Okay.
front of
Yeah.
him, Jim. As I was reading the report from Scott Boers regarding the employees, I hope that this is something that you had just said that you'll be working with James on, because again, the morale is just horrible, and the fact that, steps 1 and 2, it's like that pay matrix is just not right at this point. They feel that new people coming on board are making more than they are, and I can understand that. And I think further down in your message, you were going to perhaps be training people that you have on board, and so that eventually that they can move up into the ranks. Do you have anybody that would be ready to be able to do that now?
Go ahead, Scott.
No, go ahead, Derek.
I think that, I think that we do, it has been challenging, right, to advance people. I think one of the things that we're looking at, and I have spoken with James on this as well, is taking a look at our job descriptions for our labor force and allowing those positions to be hired with a lot less competencies. And as we train them into, allow them to advance. And we are going to be drafting up those job descriptions for the '24 budget, which will go through James. And I think, some of the challenges that we have, and you bring up a good point with the pay schedule is that all of our positions, they're really stacked together really tight. So there's not a lot of room, for people to advance unless they get promoted into these other positions. And I think that's been a problem with the pay structure at this point. So I think as we move forward through the next 2 to 3 months, when we get into the operating budget and start bringing these forward, I'll have to rely on James and figure out how that's going to work. But I do agree with you. It's very challenging with our staff right now because there is no advancement. Even to try to get them trained and get them more competencies and stuff, there's no incentives there for them to do that at this point. So it's a big hurdle, I think, that we have to get over.
And not only that, but I think, the fact that they'd have the training, what a reward to see them move on up the ladder, so to speak.
Yeah.
What a confidence builder that would be. And in such, then I think that we would certainly be able to retain those employees much longer. Thank you.
There we go. Thanks, Don.
Did you have anything you wanted to add? I saw, it looks like you were ready to get up. Oh, we're good.
I was going to say, it's not proper.
You're welcome to.
Yeah.
Our HR director is in attendance.
Yeah. I would like to address a couple of things that were brought up. First of all, the letting that step 1 and the step 2, the reason that those were suspended is because we weren't hiring people at those rates anyway. When it came to the comp studies, we checked with Gallagher, and they were telling. I checked with my employees, and they were saying that we were not, since we weren't hiring at those levels in the first place, that's why we just suspended those, and we're starting the hiring at step 3. But that really has no bearing on tenured employees, because that was just something for recruiting. That has nothing to do with how one's progressed through their steps. So, and another thing I'd like to bring up is that I spoke with Gallagher this morning on the study that we're having done. They have some preliminary numbers, and the preliminary numbers that they have says that the city of Wausau right now are right in line with what salary should be. We keep hearing, we're underpaid by $50 an hour, but the science says that we're right where we need to be. So I just wanted to throw that out there. That information is not really public right now, but I did speak with them, and I also asked them if I had permission to share that with you guys today.
Thanks, James.
Mr. Force.
Director, if we're right where we need to be, then I would assume that competing agencies around us in our geographical area are above where they need to be, because we seem to be losing people to other agencies who are paying more.
Sir, respectfully, I think people leave jobs for a lot of reasons. Pay is one of them, but it's not all of them. There are a lot of issues that, that people just they may not like the field that they're in. They may not like their supervisors. They may not like the training that they're getting. But when we compare the pay to everyone around us, we were right in the ballpark. Now, we're talking about market, and that's where we strive to be in market. We're not trying to lead the market, but we don't want to lag the market either. We want to be right there at market pay.
Thank you.
Look forward to it.
A question for, I guess, for both Ben and Scott. Water and wastewater utility staffs usually advance through certification, level 1, level 2, grade A, grade B. And I'm assuming that there are pay raises associated with that. And maybe that's wrong, maybe I'm not right on that, but are people receiving training to improve their certification and move up that scale?
There are no incentives for certifications. Some job descriptions right now require it, but there's no step-by-step incentive for employees to pursue that on their own, or for us to have them do it. I guess I disagree with James. Some of our positions, they said it doesn't have an impact on tenured employees. But we have 4-year employees that are training 2-year employees whose hourly wage, depending on what time they were hired, is higher. So you're training an employee that is making more money than you are at the time. I guess I disagree with his assessment. No, our scale is crap. Our system is not very well implemented for this. So we're going to lose employees, right? So some of our employees work in or live in Merrill. They drive through Merrill to get here. Merrill pays more. They have Fridays off. The vacation schedule is similar, and they get paid for incentives. So their certifications, they get raises. Schofield's the same way. Weston's the same way. We're going to lose people. We'll be a training facility. We don't have the manpower to keep up now. Plus, we have a rotational door of training.
Yep.
We're just going to keep slipping. We're going to fall further back, and we're going to start having issues.
Mr. Robinson.
I would just urge some caution as we approach this, because I in my 17 years at the DNR, I stayed in the same position, and when I was hired, I was near the top, and when I retired, I was way at the bottom. And they could hire people at a higher rate than they could advance people in their career, and I think that's the concern. So I would hope that any evaluation process factor in that issue of competencies, longevity, and other things relative to, and we may need to periodically make adjustments based upon where the market is for the person coming in, but also relative to the people that we've retained for a longer period of time. So I just hope that our study with Gallagher and others would look at not where are we on entry, but where are we within people based upon years of experience and other things, and where there's an opportunity to stay current with those rates and move them to market.
I think one of the things too, like when you look at, across the board, across the country, AWWA, a lot of these positions are categorized as, like, let's just say distribution maintainer 1, 2, 3, and even 4, right? So they come in, they may, not have any skills or competencies. They get them, then they advance to 2, right? We do not have that. We bring people in and they stay in the same pay scale, unless a position above them opens up and they are promoted, they just stay in that same scale. And that's just not typical when it comes to utilities for water and wastewater. And so I think we need to change where we're at from an organizational standpoint and get in line to this type of structure within the organization. And so I think as we move forward, I think that that's going to help our retention as well as our recruiting. And our competencies overall to maintain our systems and maintain all of our mandatory requirements.
Alder Herbst.
I just have two things to say. One, of course, is I think that this is a big morale issue, without a doubt. And second of all, I'm curious that the gentleman who left the water distribution, he was a maintainer, he left after 2 years. Did he go elsewhere for more pay? He did. 2 years, to me, that they've had some pretty good training at that point. And again, I would sure hate to see somebody like that leave. We've got to close the gap there. We have to do something like ASAP. Thank you.
Mr. Force.
Are exit interviews conducted with these folks who are leaving, and do we have any information about why they are leaving?
Yes, sir. Exit interviews are, I couldn't tell you right now the reasons, but we do perform exit interviews, but they're not mandatory. So if they don't want to do them, they don't have to. So, but I can check on that for you if you would like.
Yes.
If I could just address, I think that having incentive pay for certification levels also promotes a strong succession plan. Right now, there's no incentive for these employees to retain any certification, and it helps create a strong succession plan. Right now, at the wastewater treatment plant, we have basically one operator that has certification, well, two now, there's two. So I think it just builds a stronger morale environment, gives these guys more reason to do their job well, to retain them longer, receiving pay for obtaining these certifications. But I think it's in the city's best interest at this point.
Mr. Force.
Well, I would agree, Ben. Any plant that I'm familiar with, and there are many, that certification is a level of professionalism, and the employees that are maintaining their certification and increasing it are proud of that. And in fact, if you ask someone what their title is, they usually will include that certification right with their position because they've earned it. And if we're not doing that, I just think we're missing the boat, and I would agree with you. And also, I'm very sympathetic to what Scott has said. This is a serious issue, and I think it needs addressing.
Okay. Or anything else? Okay.
Unless there's more questions.
All right, we are moving on to item number 3, discussion and possible action approving staff to prepare a request for qualifications utilizing performance contracting for lead service line replacement in 2024.
Okay, so we've had presentations from the community infrastructure partners. We've also had information provided to the commission with regards to Johnson Controls as far as energy projects, and both of those were related to performance contracting, something the city hasn't stepped into before. If the commission would like to move forward with a contract for lead service line replacement moving forward into 2024 and do it on a shorter timeline like has been proposed, like the 5-year timeline to try to maximize the amount of funding that's available, the city staff would not be able to manage that on their own. We would need a private partner to really be a lead on that with us, just because we would not be able to manage that type of workload from a contract standpoint. So performance contracting has not been used with lead service line replacement before, so this would be a first. So the intent here would be to establish a request for qualifications for firms to submit us proposals of their qualifications in order to, to do this work. Once a decision was made on who to go with, if the city still wanted to move forward with that, we would establish a scope of work and begin moving down that path beginning in 2023. So we could be prepared for potential 2024 funding.
Mr. Robinson.
Do we have the order right? My concern is you're asking for qualifications without knowing what the work is, so how do you evaluate the qualifications based upon a ill-defined project? And I guess, let me just, if I can, what I'd like to know, have a better understanding of is what are the pluses and minuses of this pay for performance, and how, what's the likely cost going to be before we begin that process of embarking on it? Is it something that will save us money, cost us money, what are the benefits? I know we had the presentation, but I'm not sure that I'm in a position to necessarily jump in with both feet, asking for qualifications without knowing what that scope is. So help us understand that process.
So qualifications-based decision-making is asking for their qualifications, their history, what work they have done in performance contracting, the type of work, what work they have managed, what municipalities that they have worked with throughout all of those things, right? And so to answer your other questions, we're not even going to know how much funding we have until later this year, right? So so a lot of your questions that you want, we're not going to have, John, until after the fact. And so, a decision either needs to be made to move forward, or we go back to our proposed 15-year lead service line replacement and possibly more. Because without a private partner to step into this with and manage this work, we're not going to be able to do it, and certainly not in 5 years.
Yeah.
To follow up, but really aren't we asking them to give us a proposal? So is your intent to go through the RFQs, which I'm very familiar with,
Yep.
to predetermine who has the capacity to do the work and then ask for a request for proposals, narrow the list?
No.
And focus the list?
No. Our idea would be to hire somebody based on their qualifications and experience and then
Without
work
knowing
with
the
them.
cost?
Without knowing the cost. The cost is going to be based on our amount of funding that we spend on an annual basis. That's how this is going to work. So in the city, it's going to be a year by year, right? So depending on how much principal forgiveness we get, the city's in the utility is going to have to determine how much debt service it can take on year to year in order to move this forward.
I'm just troubled by the process and I'm not at this time in a position to support it.
If we don't start it, then we're not going to be ready for '24.
But can we go through a request for qualifications, look at what firms are capable of providing the service satisfactory to the city, then define and have a common scope on which they would propose to get a better understanding of cost? Because if you have 500,000, they can spend 500,000 on 50 hookups or 100 hookups. There's a big difference in the deliverables. I guess I would feel much more comfortable having an understanding of what I'm going to get for my money, and I'm not sure that I'm going to bring competitive pressures through the RFQ processes you've outlined it.
Well, you're probably right, but then we are not going to be ready for 2024 because this is going to take a long time. If you want to do an RFQ first, then you want to break that down and do an RFP process. Then we're not going to establish a scope of services till sometime this fall, right? And try to determine, then we're going to, like right now, then we're going to try to go out and do public outreach to the areas that we've determined, So if we're going to do this properly in 2024, based on the pilot that we're doing right now, we need to get this started before the end of summer. And the process that you're laying out is going to be a good 5 to 6 month process. And so that's why this is actually on here, so we can have the discussion on whether we're going to move forward with this. And I realize it's new. I realize, but, that we've already applied for the lead service line funding that we're going to do for next year. We don't know how much we're going to get. We don't know how much is principal forgiveness. So there's no way that I could write an RFP for this type of work.
Eric?
Yes.
Alder Herbst.
In spite of the fact that we have a lot of unknowns, I really am in favor of making a motion to approve moving forward with this process.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second? Am I allowed to second as chair? Okay, I'm going to second so we can continue the conversation. Mr. Force.
So by moving ahead with the process, what does that mean? The performance contracting process?
Well, all this would do is allow, well, I would prepare a request for qualifications and get that out for advertisement so that we could have firms provide us proposals on their qualifications so that we could review those firms and determine which one of those firms would best fit for Wausau to move forward. Now, I think, this is not a commitment for funding. This is paying them. This is not a commitment for any of that. That comes when we establish a scope of work with the firm that's selected. We have done RFQs within the city for real estate services for complicated projects through, DOT real estate services where we don't know how much things are going to cost and we don't, and then the scope of services are established after the qualifications are determined. So
if I respond to your RFQ and I am selected, I don't know what the full scope of work or what the payment arrangements will be at that time.
that's correct. Yep.
And we're not, as the city, committed to a certain time frame or a certain amount of money.
That's correct. Yep.
Do you think you could successfully get firms to apply for a process like that?
I do, yes.
Mr. Robinson.
So you're through your RFQ process, you're sole sourcing based upon the decision, sole sourcing it without being competitive, without competitive bidding.
Well, I mean, competitive, you say with, like who, based on what, John? I mean,
Cost, based on cost.
based on costs, yeah. But, typically with professional services, costs are not necessarily the top priority, right? So when we do RFPs and we weight the criteria, typically costs are down around 10 to 20%. It's more based on what the capability for the professional services are.
Yes, but in this case, I thought we were doing pay for performance for basically a performance-based contract where they would not only do the design work, but do the actual work. Are they not?
The firm itself would be the ones managing all of their, they would be hiring, or if they had the staff in-house doing all the public outreach, doing the, hiring a firm to do the planning, hiring a firm to do the design, hiring the firm to put the bid package together. We would be administering their work, right? And they would be paid based on the amount of work that is completed. And so with this, typically, and I'm going to refer it back to like energy projects, typically they would guarantee us a certain amount of savings on an annual basis based on the project, right? And that savings then would go to pay for any debt service that we would have, or that would just be savings to the city. In this case, there's no basis to get money back, right, to replace a lead service line. So the idea would be that they would establish to us and say, hey, look, we can guarantee you that the prices on an average, per lead service line installation will not exceed, let's say, $5,000. Anything above that, they will take the cost for. Okay? And their fees would be based, whatever's established between the city and them, on the amount of funding that comes in and the amount of the project on an annual basis. The scope of work would also be written in a way that on an annual basis, the city reserves that right to not move forward at any time. Because the challenge that we have, and it goes right back to your point, John, we don't know how much funding is going to be available. I mean, even in '24 yet. But we also know that, to try next year to get 600 lead service lines replaced, we're going to have to start planning this year. Public outreach, survey, all of that is going to have to get done this year to be prepared for next year, because up here, we only have that short window
Yeah.
of time.
And I
So-
think the other thing that I'm interested in, that this, organizations I've talked to that provide these kinds of things, they're telling us they will apply for the grants. They will apply and also oversee some of this stuff. I'm interested enough to look at this for at least a year to see how it goes. If we decide that we can do it better in-house and it's not worth it, we still have that opportunity. Mr. Force.
So Eric, the items that you just described, I'm looking for how do we control this contract as a city and as a waterworks board? Did you just describe the ways that we would control it to maintain our own interests?
We would control it by, asking for what the cost per service line that they would get us, right? Just like we would say, what is the guaranteed savings that we're going to
Okay, but
get through energy?
my question is, does that come before or after they've been awarded the contract through the RFQ?
After we determine who we would like to work with to establish that scope of work, and then those details would be established in that scope of work, right? So the firm is going to have to determine, what they feel the requirement, the maximum cost per service line that they're willing to guarantee, right? For us, and anything above that.
And they would have to agree. They could pull out if they wanted to.
That's correct, yes.
Mr. Robinson.
So why aren't we, you've got requests for qualifications, you got requests for information, you got requests for proposals, and you've got bidding. You're making, based upon requests for qualifications, making the decision that you're going to waive your bidding and move forward with it. Why don't you ask for a request for proposals? And you can, in part of the evaluation process would be qualifications, you'll have a better understanding of what the cost might be. And granted, there are some uncertainties, but you would be in a better position to know what your potential unit cost would be based upon that proposal coming in. You can let them evaluate the plan. You can then look at a comparative price, but at least then you've got the ability to compare apples to apples instead of making a decision based upon qualifications without knowing what that bottom line is.
Yeah, I think when we think about this, we have to get away from this whole low bid mentality. It's the same thing with, because there's so much more that goes into these professional services than just low bid. And we need to understand, and we need a partner with us that is going to work for Wausau, right? I am not comfortable writing a full scope of services, John, to get a cost for this work. Again, we don't know how much money we're going to get. And, we need somebody on board with us to determine what this scope of work is going to be and how it's going to be laid out. What resources they have to put into it, all of those things. And I can tell you, I would not be able to properly put together a full scope of work for an RFP for this work.
Mr.
The
Robinson.
beauty of a request for proposals is it's not just cost-based. It allows for
I
comparative
understand.
purposes, and you can evaluate different options and different approaches. One of the values of a request for proposals, you can bring different items to the table and negotiate it with other firms in context of approach. I'm just, given the financial condition of the utility and the uncertainty over this process, I'm uncomfortable using a request for qualifications as a driving force in making a commitment to get a work product done. I think your request for proposals, although it's a little bit more upfront, you can put it in This is, our goal is to serve, 600 lead service line replacements in the year. The proposal would be for you to identify funding sources, cost to the utility, potential cost to the owner, but I think you might, if they're interested, they'll put together a proposal.
I think, yeah, I don't think that's going to work, and I don't think we're going to be able to compare services properly. I think we need to compare it on qualifications, and this is a different way of doing business, and I think we need to look at it differently. And if we're going to move forward with this, I think in order to do this, from a professional standpoint, we need to hire somebody for these professional services based on qualifications to work with us. That's my recommendation.
So my question is this, since, it is new and we've got some things that we're not quite sure of yet, when we have our Economic Development Committee, for instance, putting out, ask for proposal or whatever, often the committee will kind of go through it and look at those who responded and give their feedback. I mean, would this body be interested in maybe reviewing some of those requests for qualification respondents?
For sure.
And maybe if we needed to move forward in that way, would that help gather a little bit of assurance? You'd have an idea of who these respondents are. You'd be able to ask questions. We'd be able to talk through some of the unknowns maybe. Is that something that would maybe be interesting to this body?
I mean, we could bring the firms in that propose to us with the qualifications in and have them, present to all of you as well.
Alder Herbst.
Mayor, how long would that take, though?
I don't know. I would guess that the respondents would be really interested in talking to us, so it would be on this body to be able to assemble ourselves. I will be here all summer, so we can probably figure something out. Mr. Force.
Eric, we've had one company come in and talk to us about this CIP. I assume you are aware of others that could do this or would be interested?
The only one that I am aware of is Johnson Controls.
Okay, just
Yeah,
those two.
Just those two. Those are the only two I'm aware of. But I do know there's other firms that do this type of procurement as well.
Yep. Mr. Force.
Yeah, one last question. I just have to ask this. And if we were not to do this, we would be plodding along on our 15-year program, and we
Right.
would be paying for it through available state funding and maybe user rates?
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
I think one of the key things too here is, and I know the mayor has talked about this in depth too, is these other potential funding sources that come up as well. That's one of the things that the firms will provide to us, or the applications for that.
Yeah, there were a couple of different foundations.
Right.
The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation is the one that is in my head. But additionally, there's funding through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, Inflation Reduction Act. And I know that I have meetings on my calendar set up with, folks from the White House who are part of the acceleration program. So there's a variety of other funding sources that could take more than one person's full-time job to just research and apply for. Mr. Robinson.
So Eric, your normal requests for qualifications are based upon like work. In qualifications for the job, for that job, is this a hybrid request for qualifications that would include a detailed description of their approach to providing lead service lane replacement in the area? So you're moving from a request for qualifications into a quasi request for proposals.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point, John. I would be requesting their qualifications, have they done other performance contracting with construction work, right? And I think I would, in general, I haven't really thought through all the details of it, but it would describe the type of work that the city is, looking at getting into. So it's going to include the fact that they are going to be doing the finance, or the request for all of our financing, right? For this, for grants, for state loans and otherwise. But we would also be basing on their experience, right, in doing projects like this. Like, I give you an example, like Johnson Controls has done projects where they've changed out thousands of meters in a year or two, right? So that would be a good example of that type of work that they may provide us based on their qualifications and type of work that they've done. Their CIP has done other work related to energy and otherwise through this type of procurement, and they could go through what their qualifications were for that and then how they've laid that out in other projects, right?
Can that be expanded into what would their approach be and what would their estimate of cost be for this project?
Like, when you say costs, I mean, like, are you looking for, like, because we don't know how much funding we're going to have, and typically
think-
these projects are based on,
I think I understand the question. You're asking how much we would have to pay them for this service?
And yes.
Okay.
I'm trying to get I'm trying to avoid a situation where we're writing out a
blank check.
a blank check.
Right. So from my understanding with talking to organizations who do this, they take a cut of whatever it is that we're, like a percentage, right?
Right.
So if they're saving money, if they're, doing a great job, that would be part of it. It's not an upfront, like, here's your $80,000 kind of a deal. So if we said, all right, we expect you to replace 800 lead service lines, we expect it to cost X number of dollars, and you get 3% of that. I have no idea. That's probably not the right percentage, but that's what they are coming to us with, this performance concept.
So I would, in order to make this meaningful, we need to know what their approach to the project would be
I think that's fair. Yes.
and in any estimates that they would have based upon that cost.
Yes. I think
Or the
I think
cost.
that's something that we all want to know. And maybe we're just thinking about it differently and articulating it differently.
so I think a good example of that, John, might be like, to give examples of how their other projects, stuff like that, so we can make a basis of typically, yeah, okay, I understand what you're saying. I think I could write that in that RFQ to give us some examples and how they would approach this, yeah.
What the proposal should include is a specific approach to Wausau. And we want them to do some of that work so we have a good idea of how they would approach this. I don't care how they did Kalamazoo, Michigan. I want to know how they're going to approach Wausau. And they can build upon that, but then, if the goal is to get X number of lines replaced within X number of years, let us know what's their assumption of lines per year, funding source.
Right.
And I know some of that's dependent upon external factors, but at least let's have a better understanding of what their approach is to our situation and what our potential risk is financially. And you can frame that within ranges, but if you just go with RFQs and don't ask for that approach to the project, you really are writing out a blank check. So if you can define it, I'd be happy to sit down and talk to you about approaches.
Any other
Okay.
comments or questions? Okay, do we feel good voting on this now? Okay. We are on, all those in favor of approving staff to prepare a request for qualifications utilizing performance contracting for lead service line replacement in 2024, taking into consideration all of the debate we've had right here, can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, we are moving on to item number 4. It is it's discussion and possible action approving travel outside the lower 48 states for the National International AWWA 2023 Conference in Toronto, Canada.
Yeah, so this came up Apparently, we have a policy in place that if staff is going to travel outside of the lower 48 states, there needs to be official approval. And so AWWA
All those
has-
mayor's conferences in Hawaii have caught up
Yep,
to
right.
us all.
AWWA is now, over probably the last 5 to 6 years, has gotten more, it's not just national, it's more international. But this year, the national conference is in Toronto, so that is outside of the lower 48, so.
I move we approve travel to Toronto for our team.
All right, I have a motion and a second by Alder Herbst. Any discussion? Mr. Robinson?
I would hope somebody would change this arcane policy and leave it up to management to make that decision, particularly when it's budgeted.
Yeah, yep.
This is not a policy issue.
We got the people in this room that can do that, so thank you for your feedback. All right, but in the meantime, since it still is a policy, all of those in favor of approving travel outside the lower 48 states for the National International AWWA 2023 Conference in Toronto, Canada, can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. That passes. We are now on to item number 5, discussion on bids open June 5th, 2023 for the construction of the granulated activated carbon treatment process. I am so excited to be talking about this.
Yeah, so I was really hoping to have the bids here, but we had an addendum that went out last week, and those bids now opening is on June 9th, so on Friday, so I apologize for that. But we do know,
It's a public meeting, you can all show up.
we have, we have 2 bidders, as we know right now, C.D. Smith, and I think it's Mid-City, right, Susan, I think?
That's correct.
Yep, thank you. So we are anxiously waiting for the bid opening at 10 a.m. on Friday.
Mr. Robinson?
Do we want to have a special meeting then to award? Is this commission involved in the awarding of it rather than waiting till July?
They certainly can be. Typically, they would just go to the Board of Public Works once everything's reviewed, and then that would be the process. But I will certainly keep all of you informed of where things are at, so.
Friday flash email.
Yes, we can do that.
Any other questions? Nope. All right, thank you. Next up is item number 6, discussion and possible action approving the reimbursement resolutions for the Safe Drinking Water and Clean Water Revolving Loan Program for the following project applications. For the Safe Drinking Water Loan, it's replacing water mains on Eau Claire Boulevard. BIL, oh my goodness, lead service line program, constructing water main on Statine Drive to Stewart Park, construction of water main looping on the west side for the clean water loan, Stewart Avenue force main, replace sanitary sewer on Eau Claire Boulevard, replacing the sanitary sewer on Washington Street, Cherry and Crocker Street lift station and rehabilitation. That is one heck of an agenda item.
Yeah, I know, sorry. But these are our local typical infrastructure projects for water and wastewater that we are applying for Safe Drinking Water and Clean Water Fund loans. And these resolutions will end up going to council, but what they do is they allow us to reimburse expenses for work that is conducted prior to funding being available.
Mr. Robinson?
Stewart Park on Statine Drive to Stewart Park, is that correct? Because you're going from the west side to my
Wait.
neighborhood.
Is that
It's actually Stewart Avenue to Stewart Park on Statine Drive. So there's a water main that cuts off by the
Where
park.
is Stewart Park? Stewart Park is on 10th Street.
No, we must have been. What's the one on Statine Drive just off of Stewart Ave?
Brockmeyer?
Is that where JoJo's Jungle is and all of that?
Correct.
It's Brockmeyer. Park.
Brockmeyer, okay.
Park is wrong.
So with that,
With that house cleaning?
with that amendment, I would move to approve. I was wondering how you were going to go from the west side to the east side.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Okay.
Just tear up the entire street, every street in Wausau, and I'm sure nobody will hate that. Okay, we'll make sure to update that.
Yes.
I think it's in the actual documentation, though. What else? Any other comments or questions? Okay, all of those in favor of approving reimbursement resolutions for the Safe Drinking Water and Clean Drinking Water revolving loan program for the projects listed on your agenda can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That carries. Thank you. Next up is item number 7, discussion and possible action approving the 2022 wastewater compliance maintenance annual report. That's known as the CMAR and resolution. And we have been notified that the agenda might say 2020 in some areas, but the resolution says 2020 in some places, although the be it resolved is 2022. So we will update that and make sure that it's correct. Mr. Robinson.
I'll move to
I have a motion by Mr. Robinson.
approve.
And I have a second by Alder Herbst. Is there anything anyone wants to share or say? Nope. Alrighty, all of those in favor of approving the 2022 wastewater compliance maintenance annual report and resolution can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes. The last item on my agenda is to adjourn. Taking note that the next meeting we have scheduled is July 10th at 1:30, but other than that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Alder Herbst, second by Mr. Robinson. All in favor can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you very much, everyone.